In the early morning hours of August the 19th, 1942, an armada of 237 ships appeared off the coast of northern France. Aboard was a raiding force of 6,100 men, mostly Canadians, along with 5 battalions of elite British commandos, Royal Marines, and American Rangers. Their objective was to capture and briefly hold the coastal resort town of Dieppe. For months, the Soviet Union had pressured the British and Americans to open a second front in Europe, relieving some of the pressure on the beleaguered Red Army. Doing so, however, would require capturing an intact port, essential for delivering the vast amounts of men and supplies needed to sustain an invasion. The Dieppe raid, codenamed Operation Jubilee, would demonstrate the feasibility of such an operation. The 4,900 men of the 2nd Canadian Division, eager for action after months of training, were confident of success. Their commander, Major General J.H. Roberts, declaring, "Don't worry, boys, it'll be a piece of cake." He could not have been more wrong. At 4 a.m., the landing ships carrying No. 3 Commando stumbled into a flotilla of German torpedo boats, resulting in a brief exchange of fire. While the enemy vessels were scattered, the German coastal defenses were now altered to the raiders' presence. Thus, when the Allied landing craft finally hit the beach, the enemy was waiting for them. What followed was chaos and slaughter. Dieppe was surrounded by high chalk cliffs, atop which the Germans had placed dozens of machine gun nests and mortar batteries pre-sighted to rake the beaches with deadly accuracy. Wave after wave of soldiers stormed out of their landing craft into the surf, only to be cut down by withering fire. Tanks struggled to advance up the beach, their tracks spinning uselessly on the loose shingle, while those that managed to reach the town found all the entrances blocked and they were picked off one by one. In the absence of adequate Allied air cover, the German Luftwaffe mercilessly strafed and bombed the beaches, inflicting horrific casualties. About the only success of the day was enjoyed by the men of No. 4 Commando, who managed to blow up the gun batteries of Estoril-sur-Mer and Varangeville in a textbook operation. But it was too little too late. At 9:40 a.m., the signal to retreat was given and the remaining men were withdrawn from the beach. They left behind 1,421 dead and 1,946 captured, more than half of the entire raiding force. Though it came at a horrendous cost, the Dieppe raid taught the Allies a vital lesson. Ports were too easily defended and could not be counted upon in a future invasion. Instead, the Allies would have to learn how to land and supply themselves on open beaches. Doing so, however, would require specialist equipment, including landing craft that could sail right up to the beach, discharge their load of men or vehicles, and then immediately unteach themselves and return to the landing fleet. Just such a vehicle would come from an unexpected source, a bull-necked, foul-mouthed, hard-drinking, freewheeling boat builder from New Orleans named Andrew Higgins. In one of the most astonishing feats of the Second World War, in just 5 short years, Higgins grew his tiny company into an industrial juggernaut that, by the end of the war, would produce over 20,000 landing craft, nearly 92% of the US Navy's entire wartime fleet. Sturdy, maneuverable, and dependable in even the heaviest surf, these humble little vessels served with distinction in nearly every theater of the conflict and completely revolutionized amphibious warfare, prompting Allied Supreme Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower to declare Andrew Higgins the man who won the war for us. This is the extraordinary story of the Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel, LCVP, better known as the Higgins Boat. Andrew Jackson Higgins was born on the 28th of August, 1886, in Columbus, Nebraska, the youngest of 10 children born to attorney John Higgins and his wife Annie O'Connor. From an early age, Andrew Higgins displayed the hustle and drive that would characterize his later business career, running small grass-cutting and newspaper delivery services and hiring local boys as employees. He was also pugnacious and distrustful of authority, being expelled from Creighton Prep High School in Omaha for getting into one too many brawls. At an early age, Higgins demonstrated a passion and genius for boat design, building an ice boat that could reach up to 96 kilometers an hour on frozen lakes. This passion was further stoked by his service in the Nebraska National Guard, where he gained experience loading and offloading troops from small boats along the Platte River. After many summers spent working in Wyoming logging camps in 1906, Higgins decided to go into business for himself and moved to Mobile, Alabama to establish a lumber import business. Unfortunately, after just a few years, a hurricane destroyed most of Higgins' assets, prompting him to move to New Orleans, where he became manager of a German-owned lumber importing firm. In 1922, he formed his own company, Higgins Lumber and Export Co., purchasing a large tract of land near Natchez, Mississippi, to harvest bold cypress and pine. The land was crisscrossed with numerous rivers, lakes, and swamps, making the trees difficult to access and transport. To solve this problem, in 1926, Higgins developed a new type of small boat, ideal for use on the rivers and bayous of the Gulf Coast. Dubbed the Eureka Boat, the 30-foot craft featured a shallow draft and especially curved spoonbill bow with a solid pine block or headlog that allowed it to power over logs and other debris debris without damaging the hull. The propeller and shaft were also housed in a half-tunnel cut into the bottom of the hull, protecting them from fouling and damage and allowing the Eureka Boat to easily back itself off the shore. In demonstrations, Higgins showed off the Eureka Boat's impressive performance by effortlessly sailing over 1-meter diameter logs and large clumps of water hyacinth, and even climbing over the seawalls of Lake Pontchartrain. The timing of Higgins's invention was fortuitous. For foreign competition and a slump in the lumber market had left him with few remaining contracts and a surplus of mahogany, the ideal wood for boat building. Higgins thus shifted his business from lumber towards boat building, a transition finalized in 1930 with the creation of Higgins Industries. The Eureka Boat found many enthusiastic buyers, including the Coast Guard and Army Corps of Engineers, who used it effectively to rescue people from floods along the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, as well as the many oil prospectors, loggers, and fur trappers who operated in the Gulf Coast waterways. It was especially popular with Prohibition-era rum runners, allowing them to travel and hide in small, seldom-used channels. But the Eureka Boat was not perfect. The shape of the hull, while ideal for skimming over obstacles, funneled water saturated with air bubbles towards the propeller, reducing its efficiency and limiting the boat's top speed to 10 knots. Fortuitously, a happy accident on the molding floor solved the problem, creating an improved hull shape that pushed debris and aerated water away from the propeller. This allowed Higgins boats to reach ever higher speeds. In 1930, a Higgins-designed craft named And How 3 shaved 3 hours off the 90-hour New Orleans to St. Louis speed record, a nearly 2,000-kilometer journey through twisting rivers. An order of 20 Eureka boats by the government of the Netherlands solidified Higgins's reputation as a master small boat designer, but there was one client he was especially eager to court: the military. Convinced that the Navy doesn't know one damn thing about small boats, Higgins foresaw the need for vast flotillas of light craft capable of carrying troops, vehicles, and equipment from transport ships directly onto the beach. Indeed, in the mid-1930s, the US Marine Corps was actively seeking such a craft, standard Navy launches having proven, as Higgins had predicted, unsuited to the task. The unique challenges of amphibious landings had been known for some time. The failure of the 1915 Gallipoli, when the British Empire and French forces attempted to capture the Dardanelles Strait from the Ottoman Empire, was partially blamed on the time it took to transfer troops and equipment from transport ships to the beach using ordinary launches, time that allowed the Turks to dig in and repel the invaders. In response, the British created the world's first modern troop landing craft. Designated X-lighters and nicknamed Beetles by the troops, the vessels were 100 feet long and featured a spoon-shaped bow and a drop-down bow ramp, allowing them to sail up to the beach and quickly offload up to 500 men and their equipment. 200 were built before the war ended in 1918. Other nations soon adopted similar designs, including Imperial Russia's El Pittafore-class landing ship, introduced in 1916, and Imperial Japan's Daihatsu class, introduced in 1924, and used extensively in operations against China in 1932 and 1937. However, the interwar leader in landing craft design remained Britain, which in 1926 introduced the Motor Landing Craft, or MLC. With a draft of only 2 meters, the MLC was capable of delivering the heaviest tanks of the time directly up to the beach and featured a unique water jet propulsion system to prevent the propeller from getting fouled. 2 more advanced British designs, the Landing Craft Mechanized, or LCM, and Landing Craft Tank, or LCT, were developed in 1941 and would serve with distinction throughout the Second World War. In 1939, a smaller craft was introduced for landing troops, known as the Landing Craft Assault, or LCA. 42 feet long, the LCA could carry 36 fully loaded troops, who disembarked down a narrow ramp at the bow. Flanking this ramp were 2 armored cubicles for the helmsman and a machine gunner, while armor plates were fitted to the sides to protect the occupants from small arms fire and shrapnel. While the LCA had its share of flaws, the narrow ramp, for example, tended to bottleneck troops exiting the craft, making them vulnerable to enemy fire. It had many advantages over later, more modern landing craft, such as bench seats for troops, better armor protection, and engines which exhausted into the water, making the craft extremely quiet. For this reason, the LCA was the preferred landing craft for British commandos, American Rangers, and other special forces. Indeed, the Ranger attack on Omaha Beach, depicted in the opening of the 1997 film Saving Private Ryan, was conducted using British LCAs, not LCVPs. The United States Navy, by contrast, was slow to adopt a modern landing craft, despite Andrew Higgins' repeated attempts to interest them in his impressive Eureka Boat. Much of this reluctance stemmed from tradition and bureaucratic inertia. The Navy's own Bureau of Construction and Repair, or BCR, was accustomed to dealing with established northern shipyards and was loath to work with a tiny southern boat builder like Higgins Industries. At the urging of the Marine Corps, however, in 1936 the Navy agreed to hold a competitive trial of potential landing craft designs at Cape May, New Jersey. To the Navy's dismay, the BCR designs proved almost impossible to handle in rough surf, with one vessel nearly capsizing. Only Higgins' Eureka Boat performed flawlessly, prompting the commanding officer of the 5th Marine Regiment to declare, "Navy standard boats are totally unsuited for landing troops, even under moderate surf conditions. They are in no sense tactical vehicles, lacking in speed and maneuverability, and are extremely difficult to handle in surf. They do not permit rapid disembarkation of troops at the water's edge." Reluctantly, in May 1938, the Navy agreed to fund the construction of a prototype 30-foot landing craft based on the Eureka Boat. However, while the prototype cost $12,000 to build, the Navy only paid Higgins $5,200, placing Higgins Industries in dire financial straits. Worse still, despite the prototype's impressive performance in trials at Virginia Beach, the entrenched Navy bureaucracy once again rejected the design, giving the rather dubious excuse that, quote, "The Higgins boat is too heavy, the speed too slow. All Higgins boats have 250 horsepower with accompanying excessive gasoline consumption for the speed obtained." In response, Higgins traveled to Washington, D.C. to plead his case to the BCR. Upon seeing the blueprints of the competing BCR design, in true Higgins fashion, he proceeded to scribble across them, "This boat stinks, HAH." The situation finally began to change in September 1939 as the Second World War broke out in Europe. Though the United States was officially neutral, military planners recognized that the country would inevitably be drawn into the conflict and that more modern equipment would be needed. The search for a new landing craft thus began in earnest. Meanwhile, Andrew Higgins continued to improve the Eureka Boat design, stretching it to 36 feet to increase capacity and improve speed and handling. An unconventional, blunt, and decidedly unsubtle businessman, Higgins was so sure of his new design that despite his desperate need for more orders, he actively encouraged clients to cancel their orders of the older 30-foot model. In a strange twist of fate, it was the last-minute change to the design which finally secured Higgins' name in military history, for the standard Navy troop jets of the time just happened to have launching davits exactly 36 feet long. Following further trials, in 1939 the Navy was finally forced to admit that the Eureka Boat was the superior design, and in 1940 officially adopted it as the Landing Craft Personnel Large, or LCPL. The LCPL first saw service with the British in 1940, who dubbed it the T-Boat and used it for conducting small commando raids along the European coast. In United States service, the boat first saw action against the Japanese during the 1942 Battle of Guadalcanal. While it retains the superior handling and beaching ability of the Eureka Boat, in combat the LCPL proved awkward to operate as troops could only disembark by jumping over the sides of the boat. However, Higgins was soon approached by Marine Lieutenant Victor Krulak, who in 1932 had observed Japanese forces using the Rampo Daihatsu-class landing craft in Shanghai. After being shown a photo of the Japanese craft by Krulak, Higgins began developing a ramped version of the LCPL, once again entirely at his own expense. The final design, known as the Landing Craft Vehicle, or LCV, was tested on Lake Pontchartrain on May 26, 1941. While initially it was planned to use the LCPL for troops and the LCV for small vehicles like jeeps, it was soon recognized that both tasks could be performed by the same vessel. The LCV was thus modified and redesignated the Landing Craft Personnel Ramped, or LCPR. This was later changed to Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel, or LCVP, what would eventually become the iconic Higgins Boat. 11 meters long and powered by a 225 horsepower diesel engine, the LCVP had a maximum speed of 12 knots and can carry one 2,700 kilogram vessel, 3,700 kilograms of cargo, or 36 fully equipped troops. In combat, it was typically manned by a crew of 4, the coxswain to steer, an engineer to maintain the engine, and a bowman and sternman to operate the ramp and anchors and man the boat's twin 30 caliber machine guns. LCVPs were carried aboard larger troop ships to just off the landing beaches, then lowered into the water using davits. They could either be lowered fully loaded or be loaded once in the water, with troops clambering down onto the craft via nets slung over the side of the troop ship. To save on weight, construction time, and the use of strategic materials, LCVPs were mainly built of wood and had minimal armor, though the steel bow ramp did provide some protection. However, the craft's primary defense was its shallow draft and speed, which allowed it to cross the distance between the troop ship and the beach, deliver its cargo, and return to the troop ship before it could be targeted by the enemy. As the planned Allied invasions of North Africa, the Pacific Islands, and continental Europe would require thousands of landing craft, Andrew Higgins set about greatly expanding his production facilities. He was aided in his endeavor by a welcome injection of capital from Finland, which had paid Higgins Industries $500,000 to build torpedo boats. However, the US government refused to allow their delivery on the minor grounds that Finland was aligned with Nazi Germany. Higgins thus sold the torpedo boats to the British and kept the finished payment, allowing him to build a massive new production facility at City Park in New Orleans. The largest covered boat building facility in the world at the time, the factory was also among the first to use Henry Ford-style mass production techniques. From here, the operation would grow at an astonishing rate. In 1938, Higgins Industries was a tiny company with only 75 employees and $13,000 in assets. By 1943, the company's 7 factories employed more than 20,000 people and were worth more to the Louisiana economy than the state's traditional staple crops of rice and sugar combined. A forceful, belligerent personality and a born problem solver, Andrew Higgins used every trick in the book to keep Higgins Boat production running at full steam, from using dummy engines made of pipes to keep the assembly lines moving until the real engines arrived, to stealing materials from government warehouses, to hanging banners over the production floor that read, "The guy who relaxes is helping the Axis." Such tactics did not endear Higgins to the military establishment, with columnist Drew Pearson writing, "Higgins is very disagreeable, likes to write insulting letters to admirals, gets on almost everyone's nerves, but is a genius when it comes to small boat design." Of the politics that inevitably came with fulfilling government contracts, Higgins had this to say, quote, "I don't give a tinker's goddamn except to do something to help win this war. I am no politician. I am awfully busy with companies and plants that I build at my own expense with such money that I had or could borrow or go in debt for." Yet for all his faults, Higgins was remarkably ahead of his time. His were the first fully integrated factories in New Orleans, employing undrafted white men, blacks, women, the elderly, and people with disabilities, all paid equal wages according to their job rating. It was a policy which was to win Higgins many enemies in the segregationist South. He also paid higher wages than most other American factories, stating in an interview, "I am paying the highest schedule of wages in the United States. Every time I raise wages, the cost of the finished article goes down because I have a bunch of men working for me who are Americans." In return, Higgins expected nothing less than total devotion to efficient productions, and his workforce delivered. By 1943, production of Higgins boats had reached an astonishing 54 per day, prompting Raymond Moley, advisor to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, to declare Higgins's assembly line for small boats broke precedents. But it is Higgins himself who takes your breath away as much as his remarkable products and his fantastic ability to multiply his products at headlong speed. Higgins is an authentic master builder, with the kind of willpower, brains, drive, and daring that characterized the American empire builders of an earlier generation. Such breakneck production, however, threatened to overwhelm the Navy's inspection process. Indeed, rather than inspecting the boats individually, inspectors soon began taking out small flotillas of 4 to 5 boats at the same time. To further improve efficiency, Higgins also ran 10-day courses to teach Navy coxswains how to properly handle his boat. On July the 23rd, 1944, a celebration was held on Lake Pontchartrain to mark the delivery of the 10,000th Higgins boat to the US Navy. By the end of the war, 20,094 of the sturdy little vessels would be built, 92% of the US Navy's entire wartime fleet. In addition to LCVPs, Higgins Industries also created the Larger Landing Craft Mechanized, or LCM, the first prototype of which Higgins designed, built, and launched in only 3 days. In total, the company produced 60 different boats for the US war effort, including torpedo boats, engines, and airdropped lifeboats. Meanwhile, Higgins' most famous creation was proving itself invaluable on the battlefield. Used in nearly every theater of operations from North Africa to Italy, France, and the Pacific islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the LCVP and other ramped landing craft forever changed the face of amphibious warfare. Whereas invading armies had previously been forced to capture a working port, allowing the enemy to concentrate their defenses on a few key targets, the Allies were now free to land along a much wider beachhead, forcing the enemy to spread their defenses more thinly. Men, vehicles, and supplies could then be efficiently transported directly onto the beach, allowing a concerted assault to be sustained. In the case of the D-Day landings in June 1944, this ability gave the Allies enough time to construct prefabricated floating harbours, codenamed Mulberry, which allowed cargo to be offloaded directly from transport ships until a proper port could be captured. This logistical feat allowed the Allies to sustain their drive from the beaches of Normandy right to the gates of Berlin. Though perhaps not as beautiful as some classic war machines like the Supermarine Spitfire or the P-51 Mustang fighters, like the Jeep, the Russian T-34 tank, and the Liberty ship, the Higgins boat nonetheless has a certain utilitarian elegance to it. A simple, rugged machine that did what it was designed to do and did it well. Indeed, such was the craft's logistical impact on the final Allied victory that in a 1964 interview with historian Stephen Ambrose, Allied Supreme Commander and late United States President Dwight D. Eisenhower declared, "If Higgins had not designed and built those LCVPs, we never could have landed on an open beach. The whole strategy of the war would have been different. He is the man who won the war for us." But perhaps more astonishing than Higgins's boat design and production numbers is that this game-changing vehicle owed its entire existence not to some Navy design request or government planning committee, but to the genius, vision, and sheer bull-headed determination of a single man, Andrew Higgins. The enterprise was conceived, built, and operated entirely on Higgins's own initiative and at his own expense, with the company receiving no government funds outside the agreed-upon price of each boat. As Joshua Schick, a curator at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, stated in a 2019 interview, his genius was problem-solving. Higgins applied it to everything in his life. Politics, dealing with unions, acquiring workers, producing fantastical things, or huge amounts of things. That was his essence. But while the Second World War made his name and saw his company grow into one of the largest employers in Louisiana, peacetime was less kind to Andrew Higgins. After the war, Higgins attempted to diversify into other products such as tent trailers, luxury pleasure boats, construction materials, a shipping line to South America, and even helicopters. However, while many of these products might have sold well in the more affluent 50s, in 1947 they were ahead of their time, and Higgins Industries faced financial difficulties and labor unrest. That same year, a hurricane inflicted millions of dollars of damage on Higgins' facilities, causing the company to hemorrhage money. The Korean War brought more government orders for Higgins boats and other small craft, but by this time, Andrew Higgins was dead, having succumbed to stomach cancer on the 1st of August 1952, just a month shy of his 66th birthday. In 1959, Higgins Industries, one of the most successful companies in the United States, filed for bankruptcy and finally closed its doors. 2 years later, its last remaining factory was converted by the newly formed National Aeronautics and Space Administration into the Michoud Assembly Facility, which was used to construct the giant Saturn V rockets for the Apollo lunar program and is still used today to produce large pieces of space hardware like modules of the International Space Station and the new Space Launch System, or SLS. Today, Andrew Higgins and his vital role in winning the Second World War are almost forgotten, yet perhaps he found satisfaction in having received the highest possible compliments from the very man his creation was designed to defeat. For upon learning of how the Allies had managed to land so much personnel and equipment so quickly at Normandy, Adolf Hitler reportedly said of Andrew Higgins, "Truly, this man is the new Noah."